I thought what might be fun to do is in this bonus episode is one of the main things we didn't get to in the last episode was a whole bunch of examples of taking scripture out of context, and I wanted to kind of go through those a little bit.
Okay. No, is this before we get into translations, which is the topic of our...
That's our main topic, but this is kind of the bonus round for out of context that we're going to do first. So, my favorite example, and this is going to shock the world and make everyone feel bad.
Great.
1 Corinthians 13 is constantly taken out of context.
The love chapter.
The love chapter. Love is patient. Love is kind. It takes no record of wrong. And we read this all the time at weddings.
That's true.
And anytime it's read at a wedding, it is being taken way out of context.
Elaborate.
Well, would you like to elaborate, Sarah? Because we already had this discussion earlier.
Right. I bumped the tray. I wasn't supposed to.
That's okay.
I don't really Oh, wait. It was being talked about with spiritual gifts, like speaking in tongues.
That's my daughter coming through upstairs.
That's okay. So go ahead.
Do you want me to yell upstairs?
No, let's not.
Okay.
Am I right?
You are right.
Talking about spiritual gifts?
Yeah, chapter 12 is all about spiritual gifts and about the structure of the church. So Paul's talking about different gifts that are in the church. He's talking about the order of importance of those gifts. And then he says, this is how the church should be run in terms of specific order and hierarchy. But I will show you an even better way. And then he starts talking about love. So Paul's argument in 1 Corinthians 13 has absolutely nothing to do with romantic love or marriage.
Let me ask you this, though. Even though it's not necessarily about marriage that he's referring, in the sense that he's referring to it, isn't it universal that love is patient, that love is kind? Can't we take that and say, he might have been talking about spiritual gifts in this case, but love does have these qualities.
But isn't that the whole point of Scripture and context? That your point might be true, but that's not what the passage is about. The passage is about church unity.
But are you saying that God can't multitask with his words? Can it mean more than one thing?
There are places where Scripture has multiple meanings. But what I'm saying is that in no way does the topic of romantic love fit with the passage. It just doesn't.
I guess what I would say, and I haven't really studied this as much as you have probably, but what I would say is I think it's universal. So even if he's talking about one thing, actually, in this sense, I think it's safe to say that every pastor in the history of the world that's ever used it at a wedding hasn't been wrong in referring to this new marriage relationship in this context.
But there are different types of love in Scripture.
True. But what does that have to do with love being patient?
Romantic love would be eros. And I'm pretty sure that when Paul's talking about church unity, he's not talking about erotic love.
Okay, so let me ask you something. Do you think that one of the qualities of love is patience?
Yes, but again, but this is the point. Is that your point is true. It's true that love is that way for everyone, but that is not the context of the passage. It goes against the context, which is the very definition of out of context.
But is he taking it out of context if it is true? I mean, are you saying that God can't use words in such a way that that this chapter was fashioned for one thing, but now we can apply it to something else?
He does do that, but that's not the issue of application. The issue of application is saying Paul's talking to the Corinthian church, and he's talking about the issue of speaking in tongues. And now we're having this issue over whether or not to buy a building in our church. So we can apply the principle of church unity to that specific application, which is different than their application, but the principle is the same in the context. If you add in an additional principle, just about done, that is called eisegesis, not exegesis. That is imposing your view onto the text rather than taking what is there.
You brought up a good point, and so I want to bring this up. You said that he wrote to the Corinthian church.
Yes.
But we read it and apply it to our own lives. So aren't we then, in fact, taking it out of context by applying these words that he wrote to somebody else?
No.
But I think what you might be saying is that this letter to that church can be used universally to other people within the body of the church. So, therefore, I think that it's safe to say that in the same way that the letter can universally be applied to the church body, that certain words that are true, because all truth is God's truth, love can be those things, even if it's not the exact type of love that he was talking about.
No, because there's a huge difference between what you're talking about and the issue of application. Application says Paul is teaching a specific principle about church unity in this passage. And therefore, we can apply that in any situation where church unity is needed. It's entirely different to say Paul's talking about church unity and we're going to use that to talk about romantic love, which is in no way implied in the passage. It is not part of the context whatsoever. Huge difference between application and eisegesis.
So
now, you're right that all truth is God's truth. You're right about that. But that part of the truth about marriage is not in that passage of Scripture. It's elsewhere, but it's not there.
So let me ask you something. Are you saying it's wrong to apply that in a marriage setting?
I'm saying that I'm not going to get too bent out of shape about it. In terms of like,
seems like you might be.
Well, on the life report, what I'm saying is that if, for example, if I was performing a wedding for somebody someday, and they said we want 1 Corinthians 13, I'd probably encourage them to choose a different passage.
But if you are saying that it is applicable to a marriage romantic
I'm not
relation,
saying that.
I'm asking you, is it? Do you believe that
No,
it is?
I
You
do
don't
not.
believe that those qualities do encompass what should be inside a marriage?
I do believe they do, and I believe that's not what Paul is talking about.
But okay, fine, he's not talking about it in that case, but you can still apply the words of Scripture.
But the context of the passage, which is what we're talking about, is not marriage. And there's no way you can say that it is.
I think I agree with you on the whole idea of taking things out of context, but I also think that God is an awesome multitasker with his words and that there are layers of meanings within Scripture.
You're going down a really dangerous road there, because it's fine when we're talking about a wedding, but what about when we're talking about a bigger issue about salvation?
know
Well,
those-
God's not really talking about salvation.
But wait, let me say
there.
something. You already said earlier that in other parts of the Bible, these qualifications or these descriptions of love are mentioned. So it's not like from out of nowhere that we would apply these things.
So why
to
not
love.
use the other passages then?
Yeah, why not? I mean, we could, but why does it hurt to use these?
Because it's not the context of the passage. Whereas something like the Ecclesiastes verse about a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken, another famous wedding verse, that's perfect. It's talking about how you need God and you need a companion in your life. It's talking about companionship. The context of that works, and the same principles come through in that passage as they do in the love passage.
I'm going to wrap this conversation up by saying I think it's fine to use that at a wedding.
And I disagree, but I love the debate.
Good job, Ben. Sarah? Hey,
What do you think, Sarah? Are you going to use 1 Corinthians 13 at your future wedding?
Not if you perform it.
good point.
I guess that means I won't be performing it.
I think we should move on. What other examples do you
Another example. That was fun. A great example we can all agree on that really helps us see this.
have? Hopefully.
sure.
Yeah, no kidding.
No, we'll agree on this one because it's about Satan.